Hello and welcome to Lesson 10, Token Economy. So in this session we're going to look at how learning theory has inspired a method of behaviour modification that is used commonly in prisons. This is what we call the token economy. Let's just recap then. Under custodial sentencing, we said there were 5 main reasons to actually put someone in custody. These are punishment, protection, deterrence, retribution and rehabilitation. But as you can see from custodial sentencing figures, recidivism rates are incredibly high. And unless you're willing to give 10-year sentences to people who steal bread, they will remain high. Because from a learning point of view, the punishment is not immediate, it's not effective, and therefore the offender will not learn. So we implement instead a token economy. You study in a token economy. Your school is a token economy. So prisons are essentially, in the same way that students are, awarded tokens. These have no intrinsic value, but they can be used to exchange for items that the prisoner values. Now remember about operant conditioning. The rewards you receive as an animal must be things that you personally desire, so food or something like that. The purpose is to extinguish those negative behaviours and establish new behaviours, so strong, socially acceptable ones. Learning theory. Let's just have a quick recap then. Operant conditioning, we have positive and negative reinforcement and punishment. Positive reinforcement, reward. Negative reinforcement, removing something unpleasant, which is a rewarding experience. We then have punishment, which is positive and negative. If a parent spanks their child, that's positive punishment because they're adding something to it. If a parent takes their child's toys away, then they are removing something. So that's a quick recap of it. Some features, remember, are if we take away the reward, then the behaviour will be extinguished. The same with the punishment. If you are behaving in a way so as to avoid a punishment, let's say you always hand in your work on time because you don't want that detention. If we suddenly bring in a no detentions policy, according to behaviourism, you are more likely to engage in that behaviour. So, behaviour can become extinct if the reward or consequence of the action is no longer there. Immediacy. The consequences must be immediate, either at the same time or just after for classical conditioning and positive reinforcement, operant conditioning, What we mean by that is if you put up your hand and you give an answer in class and then a week later I say that was a really good answer you gave, it doesn't have the same effect. And it works on contingency. Size of the effect as well is important. So is the reward a really big one or is it a meagre one? Is the punishment a strong and harsh punishment or is it relatively light? This will help shape behaviour as well. So here's your token economy. Here's a couple of examples of actual tokens used in prison. As you can see, they look a bit like coins, pound coins. So a prison begins by drawing up a list of desirable behaviours, and they may be fairly moderate things such as making your bed. So we'll use that as an example. Here we have our prisoner, and he makes his bed. Therefore, he receives a token, which he then uses to buy something he wants. In prison, most prisoners smoke, and that is a reward to them. Now, the cigarette in this case, or the nicotine rush, is a primary reinforcer, and the token becomes a secondary reinforcer because the token is effectively associated with the primary reinforcer through classical conditioning, funny enough. That makes this token, in the same way that the bell was a secondary reinforcer, that makes the token valuable and something to seek after in itself, even though it has no intrinsic value. So once a prisoner has built up a collection of tokens, they often use them for big events like day release, or they can use them for individual items depending on the category of prison that they are in. Punishment, tokens can be removed. This is negative punishment. However, In addition to the system, we also have those other punishment systems. So if you're violent towards another prisoner, you might wind up in the hole or solitary confinement. Behaviour shaping then. This is the whole purpose of token economy. We want to reward basic behaviours to begin with and then build them up into more complex behaviours. So at first you might just get a token for doing your chores, for making your bed, but over time you might start getting tokens for quite complex behaviours, such as being polite, treating others with respect, role modelling in a positive way and stuff like that. These are not individual acts that you say, good politeness, here's a token. It's more of a general behaviour. HOBB and HOLT then. They carried out research. Alabama Boys Industrial School is essentially a militant school for, not militant, a military style school for delinquents. Their aim was to reduce inappropriate behaviour before and after dinner. So children were messing around in the queues, they were causing problems to the staff, so staff were trained in token economy. The average increase of positive behaviour for the groups, and there was one control they compared it to, was 27%. So that is an increase in positive behaviour before and after dinner. The rewards were things like sweets and trips and treats, so it was very similar to a prison. However, you could argue that the sample dealt with adolescent boys, and they may not have, even delinquent children, may not be the same types of personalities and may respond differently to rewards than adult prisoners might. Advantages is relatively easy to implement, which is why almost every school in the country in the UK has some form of behaviour modification. Desirable behaviours can be tailored to the institution and the behaviour they face. So if you think about our situation, the students, we don't have to worry about a lot of violent offences, but we might want to curb things like uniform infractions. So behavioural token economy can be used in a very specific way. Can improve the environment for staff as well. If staff in a prison are not constantly dealing with aggressive, angry, violent offenders, this will improve their well-being. But token distribution, one limitation is it needs to be consistent. So you can't have one guard giving tokens consistently for every behaviour and another guard being less consistent. It has to be across the board. Good behaviour is rewarded, poor behaviour is not. Bassett and Blanchard actually found that one way they could rescue a token economy was by re-implementing this consistency principle. Evidence of the effectiveness of token economy in custodial settings. Well, although this has been largely successful in schools, it seems to be less effective in prisons. So Cohen, for example, found a reduction in offending after 2 years, but that recidivism occurred after 3. Moyes et al. Suggested that it had little effect on overall reoffending rates. Now this kind of makes sense because actually once you leave the institution, the rewards are no longer there. No one, after you've left prison, is following you around saying, oh, well done for being polite, here's a token. They're not doing that. They're leaving you to your own devices, largely. Types of behaviour that may be rewarded in a custodial custodial environment may be very different. As an adult, male who's just got out of prison, no one cares if you made your bed or not. They do care if you are rude to people or if you behave negatively. But some of those behaviours that they shaped in prison may not be that applicable outside. And then violent offenders. Rice found that token economy, 50% of the men treated using the token economy reoffended, so that's quite a high rate. Evidence by Rain found that lower activation of the autonomic nervous system means that classical conditioning and operant conditioning is less effective method for violent offenders when it comes to learning. So in other words, violent offenders do not learn through those mechanisms as effectively as you and I. So this will reduce the effectiveness of token economy. Ethical concerns, one of the main issues it's fallen out of favour, and very few institutions implement any complex form of token economy in prisons, for example, is the ethical concerns. Actually, the rights of the individuals are to some extent being infringed. They have no agreement to take part in this token economy, and yet they can be subject to it. You could argue that they're already being punished, and therefore to set up a system within the prison that punishes them further by restricting items that they would otherwise have access to is a problem. However, one way around this is you involve prisons in the development of the token economy, and the target behaviours can essentially overcome this ethical issue. Impulsive criminals and psychotics may not respond in a token economy, and therefore they may be largely immune to it. However, side track, it was found useful for schizophrenics who had auditory illusions, that using token economy actually helped them distinguish between real voice in their head, i.e. them, and these maladaptive voices. So it can be used in a potentially a psychiatric ward. So the reason why I bring that up is, while psychotics it may not work with, to say everyone with a psychiatric disorder doesn't work with, that's not quite true. So to sum up, we've looked at learning theory, primary and secondary reinforcers, extinction, short-term benefits, the fact that it works in short-term but not long-term, relatively easy to implement, and it has been used in a variety of institutions, however perhaps less effective in prisons. As always, thank you very much for your time, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, goodbye.